Christmas Eve arrived quietly, wrapped in cold air and falling snow that softened the noise of the city. Streetlights glowed like distant stars, their yellow halos shimmering against the white flakes drifting down from the sky. In front of a large, beautifully decorated house stood a young African woman, her shoulders slightly hunched, a small travel bag clutched tightly in her hands. The bag was old, its strap frayed from years of use, everything she owned, reduced to something light enough to carry alone. The house behind her looked warm and alive. Golden Christmas lights traced the roofline, blinking gently around the windows. Through the glass, shadows moved, laughter, clinking glasses, the low hum of music. The smell of roasted meat and spices leaked into the night air, mixing cruelly with the cold. Inside, people were celebrating. Outside, she stood forgotten. She shifted her weight from one foot to the other, trying to warm her numb fingers. Her breath came out in thin clouds as she stared at the door, half expecting it to open again. It didn't. The silence pressed in, broken only by the crunch of snow beneath passing footsteps and the distant sound of church bells announcing Christmas Eve. Just for tonight, she whispered to herself, though no one was listening. Her voice trembled, not from the cold alone, but from the weight in her chest. She had arrived earlier with hope, believing kindness still lived behind decorated doors. Instead, she had been measured, judged, and quietly dismissed. Too poor. Too inconvenient. Not welcome. She glanced once more through the window. Someone laughed loudly. Someone else raised a glass. None of them looked her way. A sharp wind cut through her thin coat, and she pulled it tighter around herself. Memories surfaced uninvited, long journeys, hard work, promises she had made to keep going no matter how small she felt. Tonight, those promises felt fragile. Before she turned away, she murmured softly, almost to the night itself, if you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more amazing stories. Slowly, she turned away from the house. Each step down the walkway felt heavier than the last, as if the snow itself was trying to hold her back. At the gate, she paused. The lights behind her glittered brighter, almost mocking, but she didn't look back again. As she walked into the night, her boots leaving shallow prints that quickly disappeared under fresh snow, something shifted inside her. The pain was real, sharp and raw, but beneath it, quieter and stronger, a question began to form. If they could decide my worth so easily, she thought, what could I become if I decided it for myself? The bells rang again, echoing through the cold streets as she disappeared into the darkness, unaware that this night, the loneliest of her life, was the first step toward everything that would come next. The door opened just enough for a sliver of warm light to spill onto the snow-covered walkway, casting the young African woman's shadow long and thin against the white ground. She stepped forward cautiously, hoping that maybe, just maybe, she could share in the laughter she had glimpsed from outside. The smell of roasting meat and sweet spices wrapped around her like a cruel invitation. She could almost taste the celebration she was about to be denied. "Excuse me," she said softly, her voice trembling, I just wanted to say Merry Christmas." From the doorway, a tall woman in a bright red dress glanced down at her, her expression frozen into a polite mask that didn't reach her eyes. Behind her, a man with a neatly trimmed beard shifted, barely suppressing a sigh. Their home sparkled with ornaments, tinsel catching the light from crystal chandeliers inside, yet their warmth didn't reach her. It was a house that spoke of privilege, of generations untouched by struggle, and tonight, she realized she was a stranger in that world. "You don't belong here," the woman said, her words clipped, sharp enough to slice through the crisp night air. "This isn't a place for people like you." Her words hit like a cold gust of wind, pushing the young woman back a step. "People like me?" The words echoed in her head, each repetition heavier than the snow under her boots. I just wanted to wish you a happy holiday," she stammered, glancing past them at the warm glow inside, at the smiles that felt so unreachable. "I mean no harm." But the man shook his head, stepping slightly in front of her. "We can't have this. You don't understand, this isn't for you." His tone was firm, final, like a judge passing sentence. The decorations, the laughter, the flickering candlelight, all of it seemed to close in around her like a barrier she could never cross. Her chest tightened. The weight of humiliation settled deep into her bones. She had walked all this way with hope tucked under her arm, fragile and delicate, and it had been shattered before she could even step inside. "Please," she whispered, almost to herself, almost as if saying it louder might make it true. "Please, just let me." The door clicked, shutting sharply. The warmth, the light, the life behind it, all gone in an instant. Snow swirled around her, and the cold wrapped itself around her like a bitter reminder. She pressed her hands into her coat, trying to hold herself together, but the sting in her chest was unmistakable. For a moment, she just stood there, frozen, staring at the closed door, listening to muffled laughter that now felt like mockery. And then, slowly, deliberately, she turned away. The night was dark, the snow unrelenting, but in that darkness, a spark ignited, quiet, defiant, unyielding. "I may not belong here tonight," she thought, shivering, "but someday, I will." And with that, she disappeared into the cold streets, leaving the glowing house, and their judgment, behind her, each step carrying the first flickers of a plan that would one day change everything. The snow continued to fall, heavier now, settling in her hair and dusting the shoulders of her worn coat. Each flake seemed to echo the weight pressing against her chest, tiny reminders of everything she had lost in a single moment. Her boots crunched softly against the untouched blanket of white on the streets, leaving footprints that would vanish with the next swirl of wind. Around her, the city hummed faintly, streetlights flickered, distant cars passed like ghosts, and the faint sound of music floated from houses still celebrating, but it all felt impossibly far away, as if the world she had hoped to be part of belonged to someone else entirely. She clutched her small bag tighter, feeling the rough strap bite into her fingers. Inside, there were only a few meager belongings, a notebook, a scarf, and memories she couldn't yet afford to forget. She thought about the laughter behind the closed door, the warmth of the lights, the smells that had teased her senses only moments before. "Do I even belong anywhere?" She wondered, the words rising from a place deep inside her chest, trembling on her lips. Tears began to form, sliding down her cheeks, merging with the flakes that kissed her face. The cold didn't numb her pain, it sharpened it, making her humiliation feel heavier, more permanent. She walked on, step after step, the night swallowing her small figure. Her mind raced with questions she didn't have answers for. Why them? Why me? What makes their happiness so untouchable? She paused at the edge of a quiet alley, the dim light reflecting off the icy ground. The street was empty, save for a stray dog trotting past, sniffing at the snow. She wanted to scream, to demand the world notice her pain, but no sound came. Only silence answered her, vast and unyielding. Her lips quivered, and she muttered softly to herself, a whisper meant only for the night. Maybe I'm not meant for this world, not yet." Her voice broke, swallowed by the wind, yet in it, there was something else, a flicker of defiance she didn't yet recognize. She shook her head, trying to dispel the hopelessness, forcing herself to take another step forward. The streets stretched ahead, dark and endless, but each step carried her further away from the house that had rejected her. Somewhere deep within, a quiet thought began to grow. The world may have closed its doors tonight, but perhaps, just perhaps, there were other doors she could open, doors of her own making. And so, with snow crunching beneath her feet and tears melting into the frozen earth, she walked on, alone but unbroken, unaware that this long, cold night was only the beginning of a journey that would one day bring her back, stronger, wiser, and unstoppable. The rented room smelled faintly of damp wood and cooking smoke from the kitchen below, a reminder of the life she had left behind and the life she had yet to build. A single lamp flickered in the corner, casting soft shadows across the threadbare walls, painting her small space with a gentle, warm glow. Outside, the city hummed quietly, but here, in this humble room, there was only silence, and her thoughts, heavy and insistent. She sat on the edge of the narrow bed, pulling her knees close, and rested her chin on them. The small bag she had carried through the snow was now unpacked on the floor. Inside lay the few possessions that had survived her journey, a notebook, a worn scarf, and a photograph of her late mother, smiling gently in brighter days. Her fingers lingered on the edges of the photo, tracing the familiar face. "I can't stay here forever," she whispered, the words trembling at first, then gathering strength. "I won't." Her voice was quiet but firm, cutting through the weight of despair that had threatened to settle in her chest. She lifted her head, eyes glinting with a determination that seemed to light the dim room from within. She stood, pacing slowly, letting the small space become her world, her universe, as if by declaring her intent aloud she could bend reality to her will. "I will rise," she murmured, pacing once, twice, then stopping in front of the cracked mirror. Her reflection stared back at her, a young African woman, her face still marked with the night's cold and tears, but in her eyes, a spark ignited. "No matter how long it takes. No matter how hard it gets. This isn't the end of my story." The wind rattled the window pane, carrying a few flakes of snow inside. She reached up, letting one land on her hand, cold and real. It reminded her of the streets she had walked, the loneliness she had endured, the humiliation she had faced. But it also reminded her that she had survived it, step by step, breath by breath. She sank onto the edge of the bed again, opening her notebook. Her pen hovered, then moved, scrawling a single line, "I am not defined by their judgment. I am defined by what I do next." For the first time that night, a small, genuine smile curved her lips. The room felt less like a temporary shelter and more like the birthplace of a plan, a quiet vow made not in anger, but in steadfast resolve. And as the lamp flickered one last time before steadying, she knew, deep in her bones, that the journey ahead, long, hard, and uncertain, was hers to command. Tonight, the seed of her future was planted. And from it, she would rise. The mornings began before the sun had even stirred, when the city streets were quiet except for the distant clatter of market vendors preparing for the day. She rose from her small cot, rubbing the sleep from her eyes, the memory of that Christmas Eve still burning in her chest. Her coat, thin and worn, barely kept out the chill, but she pulled it tighter and stepped into the dawn. Every breath formed a cloud in the crisp air, and every step felt like a reminder of the long road ahead. She worked wherever she could, cafes, small shops, and bustling markets. Her hands grew calloused from carrying heavy trays, counting coins, and scribbling notes late into the night. She learned quickly, not only how to survive, but how to make the small victories matter. She hustled with a determination that others noticed, even if they didn't understand it. "Careful with that, Amina," a coworker warned one morning, as she balanced a tray of steaming drinks. "You'll spill it." "I won't," she said firmly, steadying the tray. Her smile was small, quiet, but it carried a weight of defiance. Every spill avoided, every satisfied customer, every extra coin tucked into her worn bag felt like a tiny step forward. The nights were longer. In her rented room, she studied ledgers, watched tutorials on her phone, and practiced skills she had once only dreamed of mastering. She failed more times than she could count, miscounted bills, orders delivered incorrectly, clients who didn't trust her, but each failure became a lesson, each mistake a stepping stone. Her exhaustion pressed down on her, yet she refused to let it crush her spirit. Outside, the city continued on oblivious to her struggle, taxis honking, street hawkers shouting their wares, the hum of generators from nearby homes. But she carved her path through it all, invisible and relentless. One evening, counting the day's earnings under the flicker of a single bulb, she whispered to herself, "One day, this will be worth it." Her pen scratched across her notebook, tallying numbers, plotting goals, imagining the life she would one day claim. The thought of that warm, golden house on Christmas Eve was no longer just a memory, it had become fuel. And though each day bled into the next, indistinguishable in hardship, the months shaped her. Strength hardened in her muscles, patience sharpened in her mind, and resilience took root in her soul. Every early morning, every late night, every rejection and setback forged her closer to the promise she had made to herself, that she would rise, no matter how long it took. By the end of each day, as the city lights glimmered faintly in the distance and the night crept in, she would collapse onto her cot, exhausted but unwavering. And in the quiet dark, a small, unyielding flame burned brighter with each passing month, the flame that would one day guide her back to the house that had once rejected her. It was a quiet morning when she first noticed it, the kind of stillness that made even the smallest sounds feel loud. She sat at the narrow wooden desk in her rented room, sunlight spilling through a cracked window and warming the threadbare blanket on her bed. Her fingers scrolled through listings on the small laptop she had saved for months to buy, each page a mixture of hope and careful calculation. Auctions, sales, property boards, each one a distant dream, but she had learned to study them carefully, searching for even the faintest opening. Then her eyes froze. There it was. The words jumped at her from the screen, though no one else could see the connection. Her breath caught in her throat. 123, Evergreen Lane, auction date, next week. Her heart skipped a beat. She leaned closer, blinking rapidly to make sure she wasn't imagining it. The street, the house, the very address, it was the same one. The house she had stood outside that cold, humiliating Christmas Eve. The house that had shut its door on her with a final, dismissive click. She could still see it in her mind, the warm glow of the lights, the laughter drifting through the glass, the smell of roasted spices that had teased her senses like a cruel joke. She whispered to herself, barely daring to speak. It can't be, but it is. That's their house. Her fingers trembled as she clicked through the listing, examining details, photographs, auction rules. The price, the expected bids, the legal requirements, all of it seemed suddenly within reach, as if fate itself had placed this door before her. She leaned back in her chair, the sunlight warming her face, but her thoughts were racing. 1,000 what-ifs swirled in her mind. Could she really do this? Did she have enough? Could she turn months of struggle, endless work, and sacrifice into a moment that would change everything? The city outside moved on, oblivious to the storm building inside her. Vendors set up for the morning market, a rooster crowed from a nearby yard, and a light breeze carried the scent of fresh bread and earth through the window. Yet for her, time had slowed. She could feel the weight of possibility pressing down, thrilling and terrifying all at once. She pressed her hands against her cheeks, taking a deep breath. I've worked too hard to look away, she said softly, her voice firm now. If this is the chance, I'll take it. Her gaze returned to the screen, lingering on the familiar address, the photo of the grand home, the looming auction date. A quiet tension settled over her, a mix of anticipation and disbelief, as though the universe had whispered a secret meant only for her. For the first time in months, she allowed herself a small, cautious smile. This is it, she thought, heart pounding. The moment everything could change. And with that thought, the first flicker of a plan began to take shape, delicate and precise, like the first snow melting into the promise of spring. The auction hall buzzed with quiet intensity, a room filled with polished wood, crystal chandeliers, and the muted hum of whispered negotiations. Rows of chairs were occupied by men and women in tailored suits, their expressions sharp and calculating, hands raised in confident gestures as they prepared to claim whatever prize caught their eye. The air smelled faintly of leather and perfume, mixed with the crisp aroma of paper contracts stacked neatly on the long oak tables. At the back of the room, almost invisible, sat a young African woman. Her coat was simple, her posture relaxed yet alert, eyes scanning every detail without drawing attention. No one seemed to notice her. They were too busy observing each other, assessing competition, projecting wealth and influence. But she didn't need anyone to notice. She had worked for this moment, endured months of struggle, and had learned the art of patience. The auctioneer cleared his throat, a sharp, authoritative sound that cut through the murmurs. Lot 12, 123, Evergreen Lane, he announced, gesturing to a large screen behind him showing photographs of the grand home. Opening bid, 20,000. Hand shot up immediately. Whispers rippled through the room. It's a prime property, one man muttered, leaning toward his companion. Perfect for investment. You've got to bid now or regret it. The young woman's heart raced, but her face remained calm. She had studied every number, every market trend, every possible bid strategy. She waited, letting the others drive the price upward, letting them think the game belonged to them. 30,000, a wealthy bidder called out, voice confident. 35, another countered. She exhaled slowly, her hand hovering over her small notepad. Then, in a quiet, deliberate motion, she raised her paddle, modest in appearance, but bold in purpose. 40,000, she said, her voice steady, cutting through the hushed tension of the room. A ripple passed through the crowd. Heads turned, murmurs rose. Who was this quiet woman, sitting unobtrusively at the back, challenging the heavyweights of the auction floor? A few glanced at her, curiosity flashing in their eyes, but no one questioned it. They assumed she was inexperienced, perhaps naive. The auctioneer's gavel clicked sharply. 40,000. Do I hear 45? Hands went up again, but the room felt different now. Tension thickened, disbelief simmering beneath the surface. This wasn't just a bidding war, it was a silent battle, the underdog challenging the established order with patience, strategy, and quiet resolve. Outside, sunlight streamed through tall windows, casting geometric patterns across the polished floor. The young woman's pulse matched the rhythm of the gavel, her mind calm even as excitement surged. She had come prepared, and she would not falter. Every bid from this moment on carried more than money, it carried months of hardship, dreams unspoken, and the silent promise she had made to herself long ago. The final outcome hung in the air, taut as a wire, and she waited with unwavering focus, knowing that soon, everything could change. The auctioneer's gavel hovered in the air, suspended in a heartbeat that seemed to stretch endlessly. The room was thick with tension, every pair of eyes trained on the young African woman at the back, though few truly noticed her until that moment. Her hand remained steady, her paddle raised with quiet confidence. She had done everything right, calculated every step, waited for the precise moment, and now, all that preparation was about to meet its destiny. Do I hear 50,000? 55? The auctioneer's voice cracked through the murmurs, authoritative and sharp. Bids came faster, higher, but she met each with calm precision, each response measured, deliberate. Around her, the crowd leaned forward, whispers rising, glances exchanged. Who was this woman, unassuming yet unyielding, claiming what everyone thought belonged to someone else? Then, finally, the gavel struck. The sound echoed like a thunderclap across the polished wood floors, sharp and final. Sold. Lot 12, to the lady at the back. Silence. Absolute, stunned silence. The chatter, the confident murmurs, the sly smiles, all vanished in an instant. Eyes widened. Mouths opened, then closed again, disbelief written across every face. The people who had expected to dominate this auction were frozen, unsure whether to speak, to protest, or simply to stare. She blinked, almost unable to comprehend her own victory. The weight of months of struggle, the long nights, the early mornings, the failures and lessons, all of it crystallized into this one moment. Triumph washed over her like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. Her heart pounded in her chest, not with fear, but with the exhilaration of proof, she had risen. A few tentative claps echoed from the back, and she allowed herself a small smile, savoring it privately. There was no need for fanfare, no need to boast. The moment spoke for itself. She had turned humiliation into victory, rejection into opportunity. Her gaze drifted to the photographs of the property displayed on the screen, the familiar facade, the twinkling Christmas lights from months ago now frozen in the memory of her mind. This was the same house that had rejected her, that had slammed its doors in her face on that fateful night. And now, it was hers. She allowed herself a quiet, almost reverent laugh, a sound of pure release that mingled with the soft echo of the auction hall. The crowd began to murmur, the spell broken, but she remained still, savoring the gravity of the moment. Outside, sunlight streamed through the tall windows, catching the dust motes in the air, shimmering like gold. It was more than a house. It was validation, justice, a turning point. She had claimed her future with her own hands. As she stood, letting the paddle drop, a sense of calm settled over her. The journey was far from over, but tonight, the world had finally noticed what she already knew: she was unstoppable. And this was only the beginning. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a warm golden glow over Evergreen Lane. The same house she had once stared at through the snow now stood before her, familiar and imposing, yet under a different light, her light. The white trim gleamed, the windows sparkled, and the sold sign swayed gently in the breeze. In her hand, she held the keys, smooth and cold, heavy with months of struggle and the quiet weight of triumph. She stepped onto the walkway, boots crunching softly against the gravel, each step deliberate, measured, confident. The garden, once perfect and untouchable, now seemed almost to welcome her presence. She paused for a moment, inhaling the crisp air, letting the scent of pine and winter flowers mingle with the faint warmth of the late afternoon sun. From the open window, voices called out, laughter that had once been so distant and untouchable. And then they saw her. The former homeowners emerged onto their porch, their expressions frozen mid-smile, then twisting into disbelief. The man's hand lifted as if to point, then fell. The woman's eyes widened, mouth slightly agape. Recognition flashed, followed by shock. "You," the woman stammered, voice trembling. "You, how?" She allowed herself a quiet smile, calm and steady, the kind of smile that carries both power and restraint. "I told you I would rise," she said softly, holding up the keys for them to see. "It just took a little longer than you expected." Silence fell over the yard. The laughter that had once mocked her now felt hollow, replaced by a tension that neither of them could ignore. For a long moment, she let them process the truth. The girl they had dismissed, the one they had called poor, was now the owner of their home. Poetic justice was not shouted, it was quietly, undeniably present. She stepped onto the porch, her heels clicking against the wooden boards, the sound deliberate and echoing. "This house," she continued, voice calm, unwavering, "was never meant to measure my worth. I just claimed what I worked for." The former homeowners opened their mouths to speak, but no words came. The power had shifted quietly, invisibly, yet unmistakably. She didn't need to gloat, didn't need to explain further. Her presence, her keys, and her composure said everything. As she turned the key in the lock and the door swung open, she paused for a final glance at the street. Evergreen Lane was the same, yet everything had changed. With one step inside, she left behind the echoes of rejection and humiliation, walking into the home she had earned, her heart steady, her spirit unshakable. Outside, the golden sunlight lingered, illuminating the scene like a painting, a reminder that patience, persistence, and quiet determination could turn even the harshest rejection into undeniable triumph. The front door closed softly behind her, the faint click echoing through the grand foyer like a punctuation mark on the story of her life. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, spilling across polished wooden floors and illuminating the subtle shimmer of the chandeliers. The house smelled faintly of fresh paint and cedar, a welcoming scent that seemed to whisper, "This is yours now." She let herself take it in slowly, every detail, marble countertops, the smooth curve of the staircase, the light reflecting off glass cabinets filled with fine porcelain. She walked barefoot across the cool floor, feeling grounded, letting the quiet luxury seep into her bones. For a moment, she paused at the large bay window overlooking the garden. Outside, the city moved on unaware, the distant laughter of children, a hawker calling in the street, the soft hum of traffic, but none of it mattered. She was here, fully, in a space she had claimed not with arrogance or noise, but with patience, resilience, and quiet determination. Her mind drifted back to that Christmas Eve, standing in the snow with nothing but a small bag and a heart full of hope. The humiliation, the cold, the dismissal, it all seemed like a lifetime ago. And now, here she was, holding the keys to the very house that had once shut its doors in her face. A small, private smile curved her lips. Being poor was never the shame, she thought. Their arrogance was. She wandered through the rooms, touching the smooth wooden banisters, letting her fingers linger on the edges of furniture, imagining the life she could build here. Each step felt like a promise fulfilled, a quiet celebration that needed no applause. Wealth, she realized, wasn't in flashing gold or loud declarations, it was in dignity, in the calm confidence of knowing your worth without demanding recognition. She moved toward the kitchen, running her hands across the counters, thinking of the meals she would prepare, the friends she would welcome, the laughter that would fill the halls. And yet, she also understood the true richness of her journey. It wasn't just the house, but the courage, the perseverance, and the belief in herself that had carried her here. Standing in the heart of the home, she closed her eyes for a moment and breathed deeply. Peace settled over her like a soft blanket. The past was behind her, the future stretched before her, and she walked forward into it with quiet strength. Every challenge, every tear, every night of struggle had led to this moment of serene triumph. And as she stepped fully into the house, the golden light spilling across her path, she understood clearly, true wealth doesn't shout. It whispers, steady and unshakable, from within.